Welcome back to Live from Paris. Now, the United States has stepped up pressure on the Pakistani government over its alleged support of the Haqqani network, which was blamed for the attack 2 weeks ago on the US Embassy in Kabul. Yesterday, the White House called on Islamabad to clamp down on the terrorist network that operates along the porous Afghan-Pakistan border, a message that has become more insistent as tensions between Pakistan and the US have worsened in the wake of the raid that killed Osama bin Laden near Islamabad in May. So, who's responsible for the terrorism that continues to unsettle Afghanistan, and what can America, increasingly at odds with Islamabad, do about it? That's what we're looking at in Top Story today with Melissa Bell from our International Affairs Desk. Good morning.
Good morning, Claire.
Melissa. So, at the heart of tensions between Islamabad and Washington is this group, the Haqqanis. Who are they exactly?
They're a group of 5,000 to 15,000 fighters, Islamists. They are led by a father and his two sons, the father Jalaluddin Haqqani and his two sons. They operate along that very porous border. Indeed, in most parts, there barely is a border there. They have, on the Pakistani side, a town that is almost entirely theirs. They collect taxes, they run a madrasa. This is a well-established group in North Waziristan as well as across the border, although they are Afghans to begin with. Now, they have this curious mixture of, on one hand, they have this they're ideologues, they're Islamists, and they are involved in attacks. You mentioned the one in Kabul recently, but they are also run almost like a mafia network. They run extortion rackets. And of course, they're largely funded by rich people in the Gulf. So they have this tremendous power base, and they've been around for an awfully long time. Indeed, the Americans used to be friends with them, or allies at least. They were trained by the CIA back in the days when the Mujahideen were fighting the Soviets. And at the time, indeed, Jalaluddin Haqqani had been described by an American Texan Democrat representative as goodness personified. These were America's friends, but of course, as ever, best friends, worst enemies. And so it's proved with the Haqqanis.
So they've been around for a very long time, but why is it then that we're talking about them now and not as friends, but as terrorists?
Well, until now, of course, Pakistan and the United States were close allies, and so Pakistan could put gentle pressure on Islamabad to deal with this terrorist network, to which the reply came that the services, the security forces were too busy tied up elsewhere to properly take on the Haqqanis. Ever since that raid on Osama bin Laden's compound in which the United States went in without the knowledge of Islamabad, tensions have worsened. And as Pakistan's foreign minister pointed out the other day, America risks losing an ally. One of the results of that is that now Washington talks openly about this concern. We heard Admiral Mike Mullen, who's the top US commander, last week warn Pakistan against continuing to export terrorism, and specifically mentioning the Haqqanis. So the United States are talking more openly about them. That's one of the reasons. The other reason we're hearing more about them is that they've simply become more active. We saw that very bold attack on the NATO headquarters in the US Embassy in Kabul on the 13th of September. And the reason that they're getting so much bolder and bigger is that as a political settlement is sought in Afghanistan, as foreign troops prepare to withdraw, this is a group of warlords, a key player in that part of the region that want to make sure they get a place at the negotiating table, and they can get that by reminding the world, in a sense, that they're there. So for both those reasons, we're hearing an awful lot more about the Haqqanis than ever we did before. Rather like 15 years ago, no one had ever heard of the Taliban. Suddenly they were public enemy number one. We're going to be hearing about the Haqqanis now for the next few weeks and months, no doubt.
And what is it about them that makes it hard for NATO and the US to get rid of them, so to speak?
Well, on one hand, of course, you have the fact that the United States has this deteriorating relationship with Pakistan. Until now, it could bring soft pressure to bear. Now that's much harder to do. Pakistan has, the Americans, of course, also feeling that pressure of a political deadline coming up. They know that they need to find a solution, and that forces them into a position where they need to negotiate with people like this in order that they can get out clean. One of the things, for instance, that they've refused to do over the last few months, although they've considered, is put this group of Haqqanis on the foreign terrorist group list. And the reason they can't do that is because they know that they need to bring them into the negotiating table if they want to be able to get out easily as planned. So that timetable of the need for a political settlement puts pressure on the Americans. The trouble is that the Pakistanis have no interest in having a stable Afghan neighbor. not because they're worried about the Afghans per se, not because they're worried about the Americans, but because Pakistan's long-standing obsession is India. And it has been ever since partition. And the idea of a stable Afghanistan that might enter into alliance with India is Pakistan's worst nightmare. And so the intelligence services have for years been, and this is what we're hearing more and more about, behind the scenes fermenting instability across the Afghan border for reasons that have nothing to do either with Afghanistan or the United States. So as the need for political settlement approaches, the need for Pakistan to ensure that it has a peaceful neighbour simply doesn't exist, or rather gets its interest in seeing the area destabilized grows, even as these moves towards a new Afghanistan with a proper government in place and foreign security services having left looms.
Putting the Haqqanis in a position of strength.
Putting them in a huge position of strength. And in a sense, one of the ironies of this is that, yes, the United States will have managed to get Osama bin Laden. Initially, they drove the Taliban from power, but it will have been in the end this raid that went in to get Osama bin Laden, which could contribute to Islamists being allowed back in to some sort of future political arrangement in Afghanistan. An irony, I'm sure, not lost on Washington.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Melissa Bell. That was our look at Top Story. That's it for this half hour of Live from Paris. Stuart Normal will have all the latest headlines for you coming up in just a couple of minutes. Don't go away.